Before you speak or act against someone, think twice. The person standing calmly, speaking kindly without anger or abuse, might be far more powerful and influential than they appear. Never underestimate simplicity. Sometimes, the most unassuming people hold the greatest strength. A patron Republican man wearing a bold MAGA hat is stopped at the door and denied entry, sparking tension in the cafe. But just as the confrontation escalates, he reveals his true identity, leaving everyone stunned. What happens next will change everything. Comments below where you're watching from, and if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel. Life, inspirational, and motivational tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories. Thanks. Let's start the story. It was a lively afternoon in the heart of the city, the cafe buzzing with the familiar hum of conversations, the sharp hiss of the espresso machine, and the occasional clatter of ceramic cups. Known for its socially conscious ethos, the cafe was a haven for progressive thinkers, a place where local artists showcased their work and discussions on climate change or social justice flowed as freely as the coffee. The doorbell chimed, cutting through the symphony of urban life as Ethan Carter stepped inside. A man in his early 40s, Ethan exuded confidence with a calm, almost unassuming demeanor. His attire was simple, a lightning rod in today's world. I made my debut in commercial wrestling in spring of 2021. For Ethan, the hat was a declaration of his values, his identity. For many in the room, it was something else entirely. Heads turned. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Whispers floated through the cafe like restless spirits, laced with curiosity and judgment. Ethan, well acquainted with the weight his hat carried, strode to the counter with practiced ease, seemingly unbothered by the growing tension around him. Behind the counter, Mia Harper noticed him immediately. Her welcoming smile froze, her posture stiffening. A university student juggling her barista job with environmental activism, Mia was passionate about her beliefs. To her, the red hat wasn't just fabric and thread. It was a symbol of everything she protested against, everything she believed divided people. As Ethan approached, her mind raced. He was just another customer, she told herself, but her convictions gnawed at her resolve. The lively cafe seemed to grow quieter, the air heavier, as Ethan reached the counter. Ethan stepped up to the counter, his warm smile contrasting sharply with the unease that had settled over the cafe. He glanced briefly at the menu, though it was more out of habit than necessity. Good afternoon, he said, his southern drawl laced with genuine friendliness. Can I get a medium Americano, please? Mia Harper stiffened. The words reached her ears, but her eyes were locked on the bright red Freedom First hat atop Ethan's head. Her pulse quickened, a swirl of emotions rising to the surface. Anger, frustration, defiance. She was supposed to serve him just like any other customer. The cafe's policy was clear, treat everyone equally. But her conscience screamed otherwise. How could she in good faith serve someone openly wearing what she saw as a symbol of division, of values she vehemently opposed. Her hand hovered uncertainly over the register, her thoughts a storm of conflict. She glanced at her coworker Alex, who was stationed at the espresso machine. His gaze met hers, and while his expression urged her to stay professional, he offered no words. This was her call to make. Finally, Mia steadied herself, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said, the words heavier than she anticipated. "I don't think I can serve you." Ethan's brow furrowed, his friendly demeanor shifting to one of quiet disbelief. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with surprise. Mia exhaled, forcing herself to maintain eye contact. That hat," she began, her tone faltering before regaining strength. "It represents something that makes people here uncomfortable. I can't in good conscience serve you while you're wearing it." A silence followed, heavy and oppressive. Nearby patrons, who had been discreetly eavesdropping, now openly stared, their curiosity morphing into palpable tension. Whispers grew louder, the room teetering on the edge of something unspoken. Ethan straightened slightly, his expression composed but resolute. "Let me get this straight," he said, his voice even. You're refusing to serve me because of my hat?" Mia hesitated, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. "It's not just a hat," she replied, her conviction bubbling to the surface. "It stands for things that go against everything this place is supposed to represent." Ethan took a measured breath, his gaze steady on hers. "And what does this place represent?" he asked. "Tolerance? Respect? Or only for those who think the way you do?" The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. The café, once filled with lively conversation, was now a courtroom of silent judgment. Each patron, whether they realized it or not, had already chosen a side. Some nodded quietly, approving Mia's stand. Others shifted uncomfortably, uneasy with the unfolding confrontation. Mia's grip on the counter tightened, her face flushing as she tried to maintain her resolve. Ethan, still calm but visibly disappointed, glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of a few onlookers. He knew this wasn't just about coffee. It was about something much larger, something that had followed him into rooms like this for years. Ethan exhaled slowly, his gaze steady on Mia as the room seemed to hold its collective breath. He could feel the weight of the moment, the silent anticipation crackling in the air. "You're refusing to serve me because of a symbol," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And I understand that you believe you're standing by your principles. But let me share something with you." He reached into the inner pocket of his blazer, pulling out a small, embossed business card. With deliberate precision, he placed it on the counter between them, his hand lingering for just a moment before sliding it toward her. Mia hesitated, then glanced down. Her eyes widened as she read the words printed on the card. Ethan Carter, founder and CEO, Pioneer Roast. The realization hit her like a jolt of electricity. Her mind raced to process the implications, the enormity of what had just transpired. Gasps rippled through the room as nearby patrons caught wind of the revelation. A few leaned closer, whispering to each other in hushed tones. The mood shifted dramatically, the charged hostility giving way to stunned silence. Mia's face turned pale, her earlier defiance now replaced by a sinking dread. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the card, staring at it as if it might somehow change under closer scrutiny. You own this place?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. "That's right," he said evenly. "Pioneer Roast was my idea, built from the ground up. This cafe, every cafe in the chain, is part of something I created." He glanced around the room, his eyes meeting those of a few stunned patrons before returning to Mia. "And you're telling me that in one of my own establishments, I'm not welcome?" Mia felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Her convictions, once so solid and unyielding, now felt like fragile glass, splintering under the scrutiny of what she had just learned. The murmurs grew louder, the other patrons caught in the gravity of the revelation. Some looked at Ethan with newfound respect, while others struggled to reconcile the man with the symbol he wore. Ethan's voice broke the silence once more, measured and deliberate. "Principles are important," he said, his tone softer now, "but they mean very little if they only apply to the people we agree with." The words lingered in the air, heavier than anything Mia had ever served across that counter. By the time Ethan left the cafe, the tension that had gripped the room began to dissipate, but the story was just beginning to unfold. A patron seated near the counter had recorded the entire confrontation on their phone, capturing every word exchanged between Ethan and Mia. The video, shaky but clear enough to showcase the drama, was uploaded to social media within minutes, with the caption, "CEO denied service for wearing Freedom First hat in his own cafe." The internet, hungry for polarizing narratives, pounced on the clip. Within hours, the hashtags CEO Showdown and acclaim transcended across platforms. Freedom to serve trended across platforms, fueling a fiery debate. Thousands of comments poured in, each staking a claim in the ideological battle the video had ignited. Now, conservative outlets seized the opportunity to paint Ethan as a hero, standing firm against what they framed as growing intolerance. Headlines like "Business Owner Confronts Woke Agenda" and "Freedom First, a symbol of patriotism under attack," dominated their broadcasts. Pundits lauded Ethan's calm demeanor, holding him up as an example of resilience in the face of ideological bias. Meanwhile, liberal media took a different angle, focusing on the broader implications of the red hat and its divisive connotations. Opinion pieces titled "When a Hat is More Than a Hat" and "The Struggle Between Symbols and Spaces" dissected the event, framing Mia as a young woman trying to uphold her values in a fraught cultural landscape. To them, the refusal to serve Ethan wasn't about coffee, but a stand against what they believed the hat represented: exclusion, intolerance, and a painful political era. The debate spiraled, drawing in voices from every corner of the internet. Some users called for boycotts of Pioneer Roast, claiming the company failed to reflect their values. Others promised to patronize the chain in solidarity with Ethan, organizing Freedom First-themed meetups at various locations. As the video gained millions of views, both Ethan and Mia found themselves thrust into an unrelenting spotlight. The cafe became more than just a setting for a confrontation. It was now a battleground for cultural and political ideologies. The simplicity of the moment, a man trying to order coffee, was overshadowed by the storm of narratives and interpretations that had taken on lives of their own. The morning after the incident, Mia woke to the relentless chime of notifications on her phone. Her heart sank as she scrolled through the flood of messages, comments, and tags. Screenshots of her face behind the counter, frozen mid-confrontation, circulated widely. Her name trended alongside hashtags that ranged from courageous barista to fire Mia. The messages were a dizzying mix. Some praised her bravery for standing up for her beliefs, while others were outright cruel, accusing her of bigotry and demanding she lose her job. Every ping of a new notification felt like a jolt of anxiety. Mia avoided going outside, dreading the idea that someone might recognize her from the video. Even calls from friends and coworkers, offering words of support or advice, only added to the weight she carried. At first, she clung to her convictions, reassuring herself that she'd done the right thing. But as the days passed, doubt began to creep in. Had she really made a stand for her principles, or had she let her emotions cloud her judgment? Across the city, Ethan Carter sat in his home office, his own phone buzzing with texts and emails from his PR team. Maria Thompson, his head of public relations, was on her third call of the morning, her voice tight with barely concealed frustration. Ethan, this is spiraling. Investors are nervous, the press is relentless, and both sides of this debate are using us as a battlefield. We need a statement. Now. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. He'd built Pioneer Roast to be a symbol of hard work and unity, yet here he was, at the center of a cultural firestorm. If we come down too strongly on one side, we alienate half our customers, Maria continued. But staying silent looks like we're avoiding the issue. This has to be measured, thoughtful. He nodded, though his mind felt anything but clear. The weight of expectations pressed down on him. Conservative activists were organizing Freedom First Fridays at his cafes, turning them into rally points for their beliefs. Progressive groups, meanwhile, threatened boycotts, accusing Pioneer Roast of fostering an environment of intolerance. He'd walked into a cafe for coffee, not to make a statement. Late that evening, Ethan sat at his desk, drafting what felt like his 100th version of a public statement. His words needed to strike a delicate balance, acknowledge the controversy without further fueling it, and promote unity without erasing the valid emotions tied to the incident. After hours of rewrites, he leaned back and read aloud the final draft. At Pioneer Roast, we believe in the power of conversation and community. Yesterday's incident at one of our locations highlighted the challenges of navigating deeply held beliefs in a divided world. We are committed to ensuring that every person who walks through our doors feels welcome, no matter their background or opinions. While we may not always agree, Respect must remain at the heart of everything we do. The words felt solid, but the storm they aimed to calm was far from over. For both Ethan and Mia, the fallout of their encounter had become a test of resilience, forcing them to confront not just the world's perceptions, but their own. Leela James had always believed in the power of conversation to heal divisions. As a community leader and organizer, she had witnessed firsthand how open dialogue could transform hostility into understanding. When she saw the video of the café incident and the firestorm it unleashed, she knew she had to act. Leela reached out to both Ethan and Mia, proposing a public forum where they could address the underlying issues, not just between them, but within the broader community. At first, Mia balked at the idea. The thought of facing Ethan again, let alone a room full of strangers, filled her with dread. She had already endured enough judgment, enough scrutiny. But as the days passed, she realized that hiding wouldn't bring her peace. This was her chance to explain herself, to show that her actions had come from a place of conviction, not hate. Hesitantly, she agreed to attend. Ethan, on the other hand, was skeptical. He had been through countless debates and interviews about his beliefs, often met with more shouting than listening. But something about Layla's invitation struck a chord. This wasn't about politics or media sound bites. It was a chance to have a real conversation. Despite his reservations, he accepted, hopeful that it might lead to something meaningful. The community center was modest but welcoming, with rows of folding chairs arranged in a circle to encourage dialogue. As attendees trickled in, the room filled with an eclectic mix of people. Young activists wearing shirts with progressive slogans, older attendees with conservative pins, and many others who had come simply out of curiosity. The air was heavy with anticipation, a quiet hum of unease and expectation. Mia arrived early, choosing a seat on the far side of the circle, her arms folded tightly as if to shield herself. She felt every gaze, every whispered comment, but she kept her eyes down, determined to see this through. Ethan entered a few minutes later, his red Freedom First hat conspicuously absent for the first time in years. He scanned the room, his expression calm but cautious, before taking a seat near the center. Layla stood in the middle of the circle, her presence commanding but warm. "We're here because something happened that struck a nerve in all of us," she began, her voice steady and clear. "It's easy to label each other, to assume the worst. But tonight, I want to try something different. I want us to listen." She let her gaze sweep across the room, meeting eyes with each attendee. No shouting, no accusations, just honest stories. Let's try to understand the human beings behind the beliefs. The room fell silent, her words settling into the spaces between them. For the first time in weeks, Mia felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance. She shared often, not as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to the power of humility and growth. The cafe itself transformed into something new. Once a battleground for ideological tension, it became a space where people came to share ideas, stories, and cups of coffee. Activists and veterans, conservatives and progressives, all found a place at its tables. Regular community discussions drew diverse crowds, each one leaving a little more understanding than they came with. Ethan and Mia didn't always agree, but they had forged a quiet respect for one another. Over time, they found themselves collaborating on projects to bring the community together, using the cafe as their foundation. What had begun as a moment of division now stood as a symbol of what could happen when people chose to listen instead of judge. In this small corner of the world, change had taken root, not through grand speeches or sweeping reforms, but through honest conversations and the shared humanity that came from them. It was a quiet afternoon in the cafe, the soft hum of conversation blending with the gentle clinking of cups and the faint hiss of the espresso machine. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm, golden patterns across the reclaimed wood tables. At a corner table near the window, Ethan and Mia sat together, their cups of coffee between them, the faint remnants of steam curling upward. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his red Freedom First hat nowhere in sight, though its absence felt more intentional than reluctant. He smiled faintly as he glanced around the room. "It's different now," he said, his voice thoughtful. "The energy, it feels lighter." Mia nodded, wrapping her hands around her cup, letting its warmth seep into her fingers. "It does," she replied. "It's like people aren't just here for coffee anymore. They're here to connect." I sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as patrons filled the space. Young students, older couples, a group of activists in animated discussion, and a pair of veterans sharing quiet laughter. It was a mix of people who might not have shared a space like this before, but now seemed at ease with one another. Ethan broke the silence. "You know," he said, his tone reflective, "I didn't walk in here that day to make a statement. I just wanted a cup of coffee." Mia smirked, shaking her head. "And yet here we are," she said, a touch of humor in her voice. "Sometimes life doesn't care about what we plan." He chuckled softly, then grew serious. "I've thought a lot about what you said that day, about how the hat made you feel. I still don't agree with everything, but I get it now. Symbols mean different things to different people." Mia looked at him, her expression softer than it had been in the past. "And I thought about how quick I was to judge you. I was so wrapped up in what I believed that I didn't stop to think about who you were. I only saw the symbol, not the person." Ethan raised his coffee mug in a quiet toast. "To listening," he said, his smile genuine. Mia clinked her mug against his, a small but significant gesture. "And to learning," she added. As they sipped their coffee, the cafe buzzed around them, a microcosm of a divided world that, in this small space, had found a way to coexist. Conversations swirled, some heated, others calm, but all marked by a sense of openness that hadn't been there before. People listened, disagreed, laughed, and shared over steaming cups of coffee that seemed to invite connection. Ethan glanced out the window, watching a pair of college students enter the cafe, their faces animated with youthful energy. "This place," he said quietly, "it's not just a coffee shop anymore. It's something more." Mia smiled, following his gaze. "Yeah," she said, "it's hope." And in that moment, amidst the clatter of mugs and the murmur of voices, it was clear they had built something lasting. Not perfect, not finished, but real. A place where people could come together, no matter their differences, and find a little common ground. Comments below where you're watching from, and if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel. Life, inspirational, and motivational tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories.